Hello everyone, you're listening to the Eiffel Tower podcast. My name is Oliver G. This is a show about Paris. It's a podcast episode that comes out pretty much every week on Mondays. And this is going to be a rundown of 2022 from the Eiffel Tower's perspective. This episode, I think, will be more targeted towards fans of the show, people who want behind-the-scenes access and insight into what worked. But if you're brand new, I think maybe there's something for you too, because it'll point out the most popular things of the year, and that could be maybe where you go next. So the idea in this episode is sort of the best of 2022, a couple countdowns, and my sort of explanations of why I think things worked better than others. In any case, you're listening to the Eiffel Tower podcast. My name's Oliver G. Last time for 2022. Here's some music from Press Maxon to get us going. So first, a bit of a roundup. This podcast, it's more than a podcast now, isn't it? This channel, this Paris channel, grew in 2022 in, I believe, in every single metric except for one. And I'll talk about that one in a second, but sort of a recap. The biggest thing for this year was doing that countdown season, which took up sort of the first half of the year, where my wife and I went to every arrondissement, all 20 arrondissements of the city, and we sort of reviewed them after staying in a hotel, eating in a restaurant, finding cafes, finding things to do. And like I said, that was one every week, so it took up an awful lot of time. It took up an awful lot of money as well, because we went really all in. But it seems to have been a good business decision, because it really filled the site and the podcast with what I consider to be really sort of informative content. And what we also did is we made videos everywhere. We brought a photographer along. We had a researcher helping us make it. So we really went all in. And luckily, from a business perspective, it paid off because, like I said, all the metrics grew. But the one that didn't grow was the number of podcast episodes I put out. This year, this episode that you're hearing right now is the 43rd of the year, which, if you do some quick mental maths, that means I didn't do one every week. That's right. For the first time since the birth of my son, I figured that I could take breaks between seasons, and I figured, I don't want to say that I can get away with it, but I figured you guys will allow me to do it after a big season has ended, and that's exactly what I did this year. And I looked up the stats, and fortunately, the total number of downloads for the year came in at about 650,000 for this podcast, which makes it the biggest year ever. A note on this, before we get any more into stats, the statistics really aren't important to me, and I'll tell you why. I don't think they're important to the show either, and they did used to be. A couple of years ago, when I used to do ads on the show, I figured it was really important to know exactly how many people were listening, how many people downloaded the episodes, because that's what you sell to the advertisers. You say, hey, look, hundreds of thousands of people are listening, you can reach them, give me your money. And about, maybe, was it 2 years ago, I decided to stop doing ads on the show and to rely on the Patreon members whose monthly subscription essentially pays all our salaries and everything that we do here. And the freedom in that is not only I can do what I want and I don't have to chase statistics, but also it means I don't have to think about it. I don't have to think about statistics. So it's kind of interesting to me to compare with 2 years ago. There I had just slightly fewer downloads, but I did 67 episodes. So I feel like I worked a lot harder in terms of putting episodes out than I did in 2022. But still more of you have been listening, which means, I guess, more subscribers, quantity loses out to quality in 2022, which is better for all of us, I think. So there you go. There's the first behind-the-scenes look. 650,000 downloads for this podcast over the year. Now that we've got into the fact that the stats don't matter, let's get into the stats. I think what's more interesting will be why things perform so well, and I can give you that insight. And we're going to start with the website. I've got emails before, I've met people before who love this podcast and have no idea that there's a website that goes with it, the EiffelTower.com. I think a lot of podcasts out there do have websites where they don't do much more than sort of upload the episode that goes with it. But the EiffelTower.com has got a lot going on, an awful lot. Often, especially these kind of list episodes or where we went to the different arrondissements, that's where we put all the photos, all the addresses, all the clickable links, more information. So you always want to keep the EiffelTower.com close to your homepage, I'd say. And this year just gone, the website had 500,000 views. So 500,000 views on the website this year, which for perspective, for the sake of perspective, last year it was 350,000. So it's a huge growth. And that sounds weird, doesn't it? Huge growth. But I'm going to tell you the top 5 blog posts. Here they are. Number 5, what it's really like to dine at the legendary Paris restaurant Le Train Bleu. Now, this was in the 12th arrondissement. We went to this expensive and elegant and extraordinary restaurant. And what we did is the photographer Augusta came along. Charlotte came along too. She was doing the research for the countdown season. And the 4 of us, so Lena too, we sat down and had a delightful lunch, taking loads of pictures and sort of really savoring it. This was a real bucket list item for me. And I think probably the reason that blog post did so well was because of the stunning pictures. I think a lot of people wanted to see inside. If you haven't checked it out, that's a really nice visual one, that blog post. But also, if you want to go to that restaurant, it's expensive to eat there, but you can go for a coffee. However, they're probably going to tuck you away in the back somewhere if you're just having a coffee. So if you're going to splash out once in Paris, I would make it at Le Train Bleu. I've been to a few of those nice restaurants now. This one is by far and away the one that I always come back to and recommend to other people. Hopefully, one day I'll go there again. Second, in this list here. So this is the 4th most popular blog post of 2022. 10 expert tips for planning your Paris trip. No surprises, those ones work. If you have never sort of glimpsed behind the curtains of a website or a news site or anything like that, list articles always do well. And that's because, I think it's because the human eye is trained to like lists and enjoy them. The brain is trained to enjoy them. It's a quick way to get information. There's a reason when we do our shopping, we do a shopping list and we don't write an essay about all the things that we want to buy. It's just the quickest way to get information in a very pleasant way. And look, it works. So this, I think, also shows, besides that lists work, it shows that people want to come to Paris. It tells me that it was a good idea to do this countdown season and then turn it into sort of the expert tips that we learned. And it's comforting for me to know that lots of people are planning Paris trips, because without people planning Paris trips, I probably wouldn't have a job. Next, so the 3rd most read blog post of the year, movie time. Here is a video tour of every Paris arrondissement. And what I did here is I put every single YouTube video that we made, all 20 of them, onto one blog post. Just a big embedded mess of YouTube videos so that you didn't have to click around and find them elsewhere. And so we wrote a little sort of introduction, and then you just had to click on them and you got taken away to Paris for 5 minutes in every neighborhood. And I know that this went well, as most of them do, because when it gets shared on social media, especially Facebook with the link, people can share it further and further and further. And if you've ever been sitting at home wondering, how can I help the Eiffel Tower? How can I help it to grow? I got no money to become a Patreon supporter. That's the best way you can help, is you spread the word. You share it. Share it. Even if you only got 8 friends on Facebook, post an article that you like and welcome people into this world. Those videos, it was also really good for our YouTube channel, which I'll talk about in a little second. Number 2, this was also cool. I'm glad that this was the 2nd most viewed blog post of the year. It was Paris Bucket List 2022, 50 things to do in Paris. The reason I like it, first, it's a list, so you know it's going to go well. Second, I think it worked because people love the idea of ticking off a list. And in it, if you haven't read it yet, It's me and a bunch of my friends all picked 5 things we wanted to do in Paris for the first time. So this is a bunch of Parisians who live here, and the list had things from like the Tremblay restaurant, but things like sailing a boat in the pond at the Jardin de Luxembourg, eating in a specific restaurant that's just always there, but it's never happened. And I think people enjoyed being able to scroll through those things. And it also is encouraging because it makes me want to do the same thing for next year. So I imagine that will be the next episode you hear on the podcast, a bucket list for 2023. This was a surprise, actually. So this was the most viewed blog post of 2022 that was written in 2022. There were some from previous years that sort of continue to go viral, that always got a lot of people looking at them. This is from this year, and it had 15,000 people clicked on it. And it was a unique Paris apartment inside a domed rooftop home. So if you don't know what I'm talking about here, this is where the full story was. When I was in the 17th arrondissement, I noticed, I'd always noticed actually, but there's a lot of these domed rooftops around the city, and I always wonder what it looks like inside. Is it all curvy on the walls? What are those little windows like from the inside? And as it happened, a listener to my show got in contact and said that they lived in one, so I went up there and took a bunch of pictures, and that made the blog post that was the most popular of the year. If you're interested, the one that was the most popular of the year of all time in 2022 was the one, did you know there are 8 Statue of Liberty replicas in Paris, that had 40,000 people clicking on it. I have no idea why that one continues to do so well, but I assume it's because people find that little treasure hunt idea to be kind of fun. I can also see where most of those 500,000 views came from, and if you're interested, 240,000 from the United States, 65,000 from France, 46,000 from Australia, 40,000 from the UK, and 26,000 from Canada. So all English-speaking countries, except for France, of course, but that's probably because it's tourists and foreigners here that want to read in English. Also interestingly, the next countries in order: Germany, Netherlands, Ireland, India, and Sweden. So hello to all you readers out there from all those countries. Now you know that you have fellow countrymen listening and reading as well. Onwards and upwards. Aside from the blog, social media grew a lot. The biggest sort of milestone was Instagram got to over 20,000 people. So if you're following on Instagram, if you're not following, jump in there. Facebook sort of stayed around the same, which makes me think a lot of people aren't joining on Facebook as much as they are on Instagram. And YouTube, I think YouTube grew an awful lot too. Yeah, there was in 2021, I'm looking at it here. In 2021, there were 132,000 views, and then in 2022, there were 235,000 views. So it almost doubled year on year. Check it out, the Eiffel Tower on YouTube. Now, the other two metrics we can talk about before we get into the podcast episodes of the year was the newsletter, which has grown to, I think, 8,000 subscribers. Free newsletter every single Friday, pretty much, from Paris, sort of explaining what's been going on in the Eiffel Tower world, but also what's happening in Paris. So it's a good roundup of everything you might have missed, and you can find it just by going to theeiffeltower.com/newsletter, free to read. But I was going to say, if you're in a position where you can contribute to this show, as I said at the start, there's no adverts, but there is Patreon. And I just want to take the time to say what that is quickly. It's just like Netflix, right? You subscribe to it for, well, you can pay as much as you want, but $10 a month is sort of the base membership there. For that, you unlock a whole extra world of stuff, starting with the PDF guide to the city, all my best tips, but also it unlocks further parts of my website. I do videos, I do extra sort of polls and communications there, sometimes Zoom groups where we chat about things. And also, there's a very active Facebook group for the members where people discuss their travel trips, share a little behind the scenes, share pictures from... a lot of people share pictures when they bump into me in Paris or where we catch up or whatever from events. So it's a very active Facebook page. If you're not a Facebook user, don't worry, there's plenty for you too, but it's one of the perks. So patreon.com/the Eiffel Tower, and I probably don't say it enough, but you can sign up for the whole year and thereby get 2 months for free. How does this help me? It allows me to pump more money into the show, hire people. You see, that big season that we did at the start of the year, as I said, that was far from free to do. And it's really important to me that I don't go and try and get freebie hotel stays or restaurant dinners, because whenever you look on social media and you see some kind of influencer saying, oh, you got to eat at this place, chances are they got that meal or that hotel night or whatever for free. And of course, that's influenced their review. Of course, they're going to say it's a good place. Whereas if I tell you that something's good in Paris, you can rest assured that I paid to do it. So it's an honest review. Also, equally, I'll tell you the things that are bad too, which I think is equally as valuable. So patreon.com/The Earful Tower. I'm very proud to say that as I record this, we've got about 900 members that are keeping these wheels spinning. So thanks, members. And a special thank you to the few of you who've been around since the start of Patreon, which was 5 years ago on Christmas Day. Merci beaucoup. Now, time for the main event, the 5 most popular podcast episodes of the year. And it's kind of surprising. And I got a theory of why it came out this way, but let's get into it. So the 5th most popular, with 14,000 listeners, was one of the arrondissements, but not the one that you'd think. Not one of the popular arrondissements at all. It's the 15th. The 15th arrondissement of Paris, which I called the Overlooked District. I've written here, the best view of Paris, a bistro steeped in local history, a delightful bakery, the best things you should track down for the 15th arrondissement. Now that isn't enough to make it one of the top episodes, but I'll tell you why I think it is in a second after you hear the next couple. Number 4, with 15,000 listeners, was the 18th arrondissement of Paris. Now that makes sense to me. That's Montmartre. What to find in Montmartre, one of the most beautiful neighborhoods in Paris. I interviewed Basil, who was the street artist who did our caricature in the Place du Théâtre, and we gave it a very high ranking out of 100 in our highly scientific rankings at the end. Now that makes sense to me that would make the top 5. What doesn't make sense to me is, or didn't make sense to me, is what made number 3, which is the 16th arrondissement of Paris, the Sweet Life. I love this arrondissement actually. It's the incredible Art Nouveau by Hector Guimard, a chat with Franck Oudou, who's the owner of the Art Nouveau bar Cravon, which I know a few of your listeners have gone and visited. It's a really beautiful little bar over in the 16th. Now, why on earth was that so popular when we have episodes about the Latin Quarter and the Marais and all that? I'll explain it after we get to number 1. So number 2, the second most popular episode of the year with 17,000 listeners, was Paris Bucket List, things to do in 2022. Now that matches with the website. I had a guest, Shelley, a friend of mine and a regular listener, and she shared 5 things she wanted to do in Paris. She's an art consultant, and she, as I wrote here, she has her finger firmly on the pulse of things to do in Paris, and she had a really good list of things that she wanted to do. So it was us discussing our lists, and her being quite competitive, even though I finished my list first this year. I didn't even know she finished hers. On to number 1, and the 17th arrondissement of Paris, a slice of family life, came in at the top spot. 25,000 listeners. 25,000 listeners. Now, why on earth would they go for the 17th arrondissement of Paris, of all places? I think a lot of people would say it's probably one of the more boring arrondissements, so why did they click on that one? And the answer is that is where the Dome apartment that I visited was in the 17th. So what I suspect happened, and what I suspect influenced the whole top 5, was people clicked on that blog post to read about the Dome apartment and to look inside it. And then all these new people to the website clicked there and said, I might have a little listen to the podcast. I suspect also a lot of them subscribed to the show, and as a result, the next episode they heard the very next week was the 16th arrondissement and then the 15th arrondissement, meaning that part of the countdown was the most popular thanks to that viral article. So what does that tell us? What does that tell us all? I guess what it says is that I'm really glad that I made the website and put so much effort into making the EarfulTower.com so, I don't know, so full of detail, pictures and information, and dare I say it, entertainment, because it sort of ended up scratching the back of the podcast and sending a lot of new listeners our way, growing this community and allowing it to be a job for a growing number of us. That's something we'll talk about more in the new year, the fact that the team is growing and how it's growing and who is involved. But this has just been me and you guys, a little look behind the scenes. So I guess the moral of it is, if you're a new listener, there are some good places to check out. But really, at the same time, I think just because something was maybe the top listened to thing doesn't mean it's the best episode. If it were up to me, a lot of people ask me, especially because there's 350 episodes now or whatever, a lot of people say, where do I begin? Should I start at the beginning? And I personally, I don't think you should. What I think you should do if you're new to this show is you should scroll through the 300 episodes and see if a topic or a subject or a guest's name jumps out at you. So, for example, if you're really into painting, maybe there's some time I interviewed a painter or I was in the Louvre Museum or whatever. Start there. Start with your interests and then expand. And if you really like it, listen to a whole season, like the honeymoon season or the countdown season. And then if you really feel like you like it, do as I know a bunch of other people have done and start at the very beginning. But it comes with rules. If you listen to every single episode, you do have to email me and tell me which was your favorite and your least favorite. And you also have to leave a review. So with that in mind, if you've enjoyed this year of the Eiffel Tower podcast and you want to see it grow, please spread the word. Even if it's just texting a friend or sharing it on Facebook or leaving some kind of positive review somewhere, it means a great deal. In fact, in all honesty, I'd rather you share the word on Instagram or Facebook than leave me a review, because let's be honest, who really looks at those reviews except me anyway? I'd rather you left a review on your own Facebook and said, check out this podcast that I like, even if I never see it, because I know that actually works. And if you're in a position to do so, please consider signing up as a Patreon supporter, because that is how this show keeps getting better. I've revealed for some of the top tier Patreon members exactly what's in store in 2023. I got grand plans, and I'm not just saying it, it's written there. You can unlock it and read it. But I'll tell you that the next season of the show is going to take me all over Paris and over a fair bit of France as well, in a very structured way. I can't say much more than that, but it's something to look forward to. As for me, a personal thank you to all the members, to all the listeners and readers, to all the people who found our book, whether that's via the online shop or Paris bookshops throughout the year. Thanks to all the people who behind the scenes, the unsung heroes who've made this show bigger and better. Special thanks to Paris, Charlotte, Press Maxon, Augusta, Lena, Eddie, and all the VIP members helping with book distribution. And then lastly, all the people who've booked Eiffel Tower tours, walking tours in 2022. It's still sort of been in the test phase for me this year, figuring out the best way to teach guides to show the Eiffel Towers Paris to people from around the world. And I'm excited to say that I think we have pretty much perfected it. So look forward in 2023 to seeing more tours, walking tours of some of the more famous and more insolite, the more offbeat places around the city. Walking tours, private walking tours. Have a think about it. If that's something for you, maybe we'll be able to help you in the new year. That will do for me. Thanks very much for listening to this. Hope you've enjoyed this look behind the scenes, behind the curtains. And I look forward to seeing you in 2023, where I plan to take the Eiffel Tower to new heights and where I hope you'll be along for the ride. Thanks very much, everyone. Merci beaucoup. Have a happy new year, and au revoir.